I want to bring in now Jason Rantz, host of the Jason Rantz radio show at KTTH in Seattle. Jason, you've seen these things unfold before in Seattle. I mean, I know Minneapolis is kind of the center right now, but we've seen it across the country. Your initial thoughts about replacing the NPD, Minneapolis Police Department, with the Public Safety Department?
Well, it's a horrible idea, but what weirdly, as I hear the reporting and I read up on what this is all about, I believe this to be a political question. It's no longer about public safety, because we've made the public safety arguments on this show, for example, almost every single week for the last several months. People keep dying, and the reason why that happens is because politicians are pulling these moves, these policy prescriptions, and they're failing. And so at some point, the voters have to weigh in. And I think if you can get something like this to be honestly written, I want the folks in Minneapolis to vote. I understand that there is some anxiety around that, and I have the anxiety here in Seattle every time there's a person who's running for office who's a little bit fringe and really far to the left, of thinking, maybe I live in a city that is filled with people who want this. And so I think once and for all, let's see what Minneapolis actually wants. If this is the direction that the city wants, if the people there are okay with the results that they're seeing, okay, we'll get on record. If they're not, it's important to get on record right now, because in that report you just heard, I think it's absolutely correct. There is momentum. If this were to pass, it's going to go elsewhere. But if it were to fail, it also stops the momentum.
Well, you know, and what's really disturbing about that, too, is if they can't explain it, and they certainly won't do that probably by this Friday when people are actually voting, I would want to know this. So you're going to replace all the cops with something that you are not a bunch of cops coming up with, and that these people are now going to handle hostage situations. I was just kind of taking notes, thinking about the stuff I would ask, like more dangerous calls than anything else, domestic violence, doubling the number of homicides. So the Public Safety Department now, Jason, these people, whoever they're going to be, they're going to be able to do all this stuff, we hope, because they're going to need to be able to do all that stuff.
Well, they're definitely not going to be able to do any of that stuff. And that's the reality of the situation. That's why I think clarity is really important. Part of the reason why you're not getting any answers from the folks behind this is because they either don't know the answers, which is terrifying, but that goes to their end goal, which is just truly to, they say what they want to do, right? They want to dismantle police departments. They are systems of oppression, and they want to rebuild it in a political image. So that's really what this is all about. They're trying to systematically dismantle these systems of oppression and then rebuild it with a political lens in mind and a social justice lens in mind. And that's the terrifying part about this. But like I said, if that's truly what the people want, then go for it. But if it's not, they need to start stepping up, speaking out, and pushing back much quicker. Exactly.
And in full disclosure, that's my former city. I mean, Minneapolis, I lived there for many years, met my husband there. We were both on air at the time. We've covered a lot of crime in that city. What they have right now is off the charts, and it's too bad that people may not get the answers they want before they have to vote on Friday. We will cover this closely. Meanwhile, the husband of the only female NYPD officer killed on 9/11 is speaking out. He says politicians who have called to defund the police have no business hugging heroes on 9/11. Jim and Moira Smith both worked with the same precinct and shared a daughter who was just 2 years old at the time when mom died in the collapse of the South Tower. Here you can see Moira in one of the most iconic and searing images from that day. According to the report, Jim slammed anti-police politicians who would be pictured with their arms around the heroes and trying to bask in the reflected glory of what my wife and other officers did. By September 12th, they'll be back defunding the police. I have no intention of being anywhere near it. Jason.
Good for him, because usually you and I might make that point, but when someone who is so deeply connected to that tragedy the way that he is in this way makes that point, it's all the more powerful. You see politicians all the time taking photos so they can post on Instagram, so they can reuse when they're running for re-election, pretending that the previous years wasn't committed to dismantling the police department. Sorry, the Democratic Party has to own this. There are not enough people within the party, within leadership, pushing back at some of the fringe positions. And part of the reason why they're not doing it, they're no longer all that fringe in the the Democratic Party, the progressive wing,
that's interesting,
which wants to defund police, are a larger number. I don't believe that all Democrats want to defund the police, but I do believe there are a lot of Democrats who are too scared to say anything for fear that they might get challenged when they're up for re-election by one of those progressive fringe members.
You know, the other election that we'll be watching across the country is right here in New York with Eric Adams, who's a former cop, a Democrat, who's running against these all these programs and his other pre-primary candidate opponents to defund the police. It'll be really interesting how many votes he ends up getting. Jason Rantz, thank you very much.